What if the billionaire-dominated world we live in today wasn't the natural result of economic evolution, but the outcome of deliberate choices made by two leaders who believed they could redesign the global system from the ground up? What if the wealth gap, the financialized markets, the shrinking middle class, and the political power of corporations weren't random side effects, but predictable outcomes of policies crafted decades ago? This is the mystery at the heart of the story of Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. Two leaders who never shared a country but shared a philosophy, a mission, and ultimately a legacy that reshaped the modern world. To understand how they built what many call the billionaire world order, we must go back to the 1970s. When inflation was spiraling, industries were collapsing, and people were losing faith in governments that seemed unable to control the economic chaos around them. Into this era of confusion emerged a new set of economic ideas: deregulation, privatization, tax reduction, and an unwavering faith in markets. These ideas had existed on the fringes for years, but the crises of the 70s pushed them to the center, and soon two leaders would use them to launch one of the most radical economic transformations of the 20th century. Before Thatcher and Reagan, Western economies were built on a social market model with powerful unions, heavily regulated industries, and tax rates on the wealthy that sometimes exceeded 80 or even 90%. Financial markets were restrained, corporations were limited in their size and influence, and governments played an active role in guiding economic stability. But by the late 70s, frustration was rising, inflation soared, unemployment increased. The public wanted change. Thatcher in the UK and Reagan in the US promised that change. And when they took power, they rewired the foundations of their economies in ways that would ripple across the world for decades. They slashed taxes for the wealthy and for corporations, arguing that prosperity would trickle down to everyone else. They deregulated industries, especially finance, allowing banks, stock traders, and corporations to operate with unprecedented freedom. They broke the power of unions, Thatcher by defeating the miners in a brutal showdown, and Reagan by firing over 11,000 striking air traffic controllers. And perhaps most importantly, they triggered the rise of financialization. A shift from an economy built on manufacturing and wages to one dominated by credit, speculation, and asset markets. Finance grew faster than any other sector, and with it grew a new class of ultra-rich investors, hedge fund managers, and corporate executives. By the end of the 1980s, the billionaire era had begun, yet the system they built soon began overheating. Debt rose, wages stagnated, housing markets inflated, inequality widened. Cracks appeared as early as 1987, when Black Monday triggered the largest one-day stock market crash in history, revealing how fragile and interconnected the new financial system had become. But instead of reversing course, governments around the world doubled down on the Thatcher-Reagan model, using bailouts, low interest rates, and global trade agreements to sustain the system. The billionaire world order had become too integrated into global power structures to be challenged, and so the model spread. Clinton continued deregulation, Blair embraced privatization. Europe adopted market reforms. China opened itself to global capital. Globalization accelerated everything. Corporations shifted production overseas, wages flatlined, and wealth concentrated even faster. By the 2000s, the system was no longer Anglo-American, it was global. And when the 2008 financial crisis hit, it exposed the weaknesses that had been building for decades. But even after the crisis, the fundamental architecture remained intact. The wealthy recovered almost immediately while millions lost homes, savings, and jobs. Financial markets were rescued. Workers were not. Billionaires doubled their wealth in the decade that followed. Today the consequences are unmistakable. The richest 1% owns more wealth than 5 billion people. More than 2,700 billionaires control trillions of dollars. And financial markets influence politics more than at any point in modern history. The patterns Thatcher and Reagan set in motion: deregulation, tax cuts, privatization, and market supremacy still shape the global economy. We see the same logic in tech monopolies and the power of hedge funds, in the explosion of AI-driven wealth, and in the widening financial divide between those who own assets and those who don't. What began as an economic experiment in the 1980s has solidified into the world order of the 2020s. From this long arc of history, three lessons emerge. First, Thatcher and Reagan didn't just implement policies, they built a global template that governments around the world adopted. Second, financialization, not technology, is the true engine behind modern billionaire wealth. And third, systems designed to concentrate power tend to defend themselves fiercely, making change difficult without major social or political pressure. And here is the warning: systems don't collapse because they are unfair, they collapse when too many people stop believing they work. The cracks we see today are not random. They're signals. If this deep dive gave you a clearer understanding of how our world was engineered, consider subscribing for more explorations into the forces shaping our future.